To understand PTSD, one must understand that there are at least 3 brains in the human body and not just one. My belief is there is even a 4th brain in each and every cell of the body, and Candace Pert has gone a long way towards proving that fact. Candace Pert is the researcher who discovered the enkephalin system and endorphins. She postulates that this system is not only the natural opium production system for the body, but also a primitive brain, which is capable of experiencing and transferring feelings and also acts as an early warning web. She believes that this web of endorphins feelings constitute a highly evolved and intricate brain system. In a sense, each cell is composed of a primary primitive brain. Often, these brains work quicker than the logical part of the brain. All the cells in the body are connected and are capable of body memory, and therefore are all minute brains. We are most familiar with the human brain, which deals with rational thought and consists of the cerebral cortex and the prefrontal lobes. This part of the brain's thinking is linear and causal and allows a person to understand a situation cognitively. This is the conscious part of our brain and is the part that traditional psychotherapy or talk therapy is aimed at. Most people believe or think that if they just understand a situation, then they can change their behavior easily. It often works this way, but if the other brains are not cooperative, this supposition breaks down. The mammalian brain is an older, more primitive part of the brain, which consists of the limbic system, located in the middle section of the brain. This brain, which we share with all other mammals, is the part of the brain that manages and creates our feelings. This brain works differently than the logical human brain. It is primarily made up of chemicals called neurotransmitters that help us think and feel, though not necessarily on a logical basis. The reptilian brain consists of the medulla oblongata, which is located at the base of the skull. Humans and all reptiles have this brain in common. This brain manages non-conscious processes and instincts, keeping the heartbeat regular and fighting off infection. People don't have to consciously think about how to perform these functions, because this part of the brain does it automatically. The mammalian brain and the reptilian brain make up a large part of our subconscious processes. The subconscious area of the brain is responsible for 85% of our thinking. Only about 12 or 15% of processing occurs in the conscious area. These 2 brains operate on the principle of operant and classical conditioning, which was originally discovered by Pavlov. Pavlov found that if he gave a starving dog some food, which was an unconditioned stimulus, the dog would salivate, and this would be considered an unconditioned response. An unconditioned response happens naturally when a certain stimulus is present. The reasons that dogs and humans begin to salivate when they perceive food is that their mouths emit enzymes that assist in breaking down the food, and they get a head start on digestion by doing this. If a bell is paired or presented with the food repeatedly, a conditioned stimulus status is acquired, which creates the conditioned response of salivation. Eventually, the bell alone will cause that salivation. That means that at some point, if a human being has been conditioned in this manner, their consciousness can be told that the bell will no longer bring them food, making the salivation pointless. However, the person will automatically salivate anyway at the sound of the bell because of the conditioning of these two primitive brains. If something is repeated enough or is so powerful in its effect that learning gets imprinted, it becomes very hard to dislodge it even when situations change. That is why the feelings or habits change so slowly, even after the conscious thoughts have changed. Without some kind of intervention to change or block the stimulus-response dynamic, these more primitive brains and the body often will lag 2 to 5 years behind the cerebrum and at times will remain active indefinitely. This is why people find it so hard to change and are often so confused and frustrated by their ability to do so. Even highly intelligent people can sometimes struggle to fix a problem and then irrationally conclude that they must be stupid or lazy when they can't do it. And that is not the case. Laziness is not the issue. Basic brain chemistry is. The three brains and the more primitive brains in the cells of the body are all supposed to talk with one another and be congruent with no major disagreements. That is impossible in real life at all times, but in general, congruence between the brains is the definition of good mental health. So one wants to think, feel, and act with congruence. It is theorized that there are gates between these three brains so they can communicate. As discussed previously, when a person has experienced a significant shock, they go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. This is nature's way of protecting the person from being overwhelmed by the reality of the trauma and to allow their body to become more energized to deal with the particular threat. There is some natural dissociation between their thoughts and their feelings about what is really happening because they don't have time to fully process the events. This blocks up the gates between the human and the mammalian brain, thereby suppressing the feelings. Only later, after the emergency is resolved and the body returns to homeostasis or balance, which is Newton's law of to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, will the person reestablish the connection between the three brains and the dissociation will be resolved. Remember that homeostasis is the process by which every living thing makes continual adjustments to keep itself in a stable condition to function to the best of its ability. Sometimes the shock is so great or repeated so often that these gates become semi-permanently blocked up, and that creates what's called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance occurs when the brains are no longer in alignment, causing incongruence. It is not an unusual phenomenon for the brains to think differently about the same issue. It's only the amount, rate, and intensity of this incongruence which causes a problem in PTSD. The problem is most readily seen when a person is confronted with an overwhelming situation. The person's job is to try to get the brains back in alignment, which is very difficult and usually has to occur on all levels of functioning.